Environmental group, the Green Connection, has welcomed the Makhanda High Court's dismissal of oil giant Shell's application for leave to appeal. Shell sought to appeal the December interim interdict against its seismic survey along the wild coast of South Africa. The interdict was awarded to communities along the wild coast who approached the courts to stop the survey, saying not all legal prescripts were adhered to in awarding the exploration rights. Now, the application for leave to appeal was dismissed with costs. The interdict was awarded to the East Coast fishers on the 28th of December last year, pending a hearing on this matter scheduled for 30 May this year. Shell subsequently suspended the survey along the wild coast. Green Connection says this is the second victory for fisher communities on both the east and west coast. That's after West Coast fishing communities lodged papers seeking an interdict against Australian companies' searches of Seismic Survey, which was granted last month.
The Green Connection is really pleased at the court outcome on the Wild Coast Shell matter. Shell had applied to appeal against the interdict, and that leave to appeal has been denied, which means the seismic ban stays in place. This must be really good news for all the coastal communities of the Wild Coast. While in the meantime, we are also glad that the West Coast seismic ban remains, and that we are now going to be looking at the merits of the cases in the Wild Coast case on the 30th of May, and let's see what happens there. But we are very pleased with the decision of the court today.
Let's continue the conversation now with Sinegugu Zukulu, Program Manager for non-profit organization Sustaining the Wild Coast, who lives within the Pondoland Marine Protected Area along the Eastern Cape's Wild Coast. He joins us from there in the Eastern Cape of South Africa. Very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us, Mr. Zukulu. So, obviously a victory for the communities. We mentioned in that introduction that it's both the East and West Coast of South Africa, but the High Court is effectively leaving the interdict in place. What has been the reaction of the communities to this news?
Good evening, Tsepiso, and good evening to the viewers at home. We welcome and the judgment handed down, or the denial of the appeal to the Department of Mineral Resources and also to Shell. But I think it's not more about the celebration and all of that. What concerns us the most is the continued effort to the government not to listen to the voices of the coastal communities and to the concerns that are being raised by coastal communities.
And what are those
concerns? Leaves one wondering as well whether the government is really serious about listening to those coastal communities. Our concern, one and top of the list, is the question of consultation. This is a huge undertaking when the government wants to explore for oil and gas, or to give permission to Shell to explore for oil and gas. That is a major, because science is telling us, and the scientists have signed affidavits to support our case, that if seismic exploration is done, it has got an impact, an immediate impact on the catches. In other words, what people would catch, those who rely on fishing within the ocean. But also in terms of what, if oil and gas is found within our ocean, what impact it would have. So, but major challenge here, the government having taken this, we hear all these arguments about the economic benefits, but why is the government not willing to engage, to let the coastal communities participate?
Why do you think that is, Mr. Zukulu? Why do you think that is? I mean, just looking back at such projects in South Africa, it goes back to 2014. One would think that the government would then be alive to the objections that communities have along the coastlines, presented even in the Northern Cape, for instance, so well-known cases there. Take us through what you have been through as a community. You say you've appealed to government. At what stages, and what has been government's behavior? Have they blatantly ignored you?
Government has blatantly ignored the voices of the rural communities, of coastal communities, and it's not for the first time. If you are looking, there are various bills. For instance, you have got what you call the traditional leadership and Khoisan leadership bill, which we vehemently opposed because government was trying to give powers to traditional councils to say if an investor comes to communal land areas which are governed by traditional leaders, that law is giving those traditional leaders or traditional councils a permission to be able to do engagements without consulting with the people, with the landowners, people who live within that land. We're raising concern. And also when the government came up with the Marine Spatial Planning Bill, which is the bill that they are using now for this seismic exploration for oil and gas, we objected as well there because we were not happy because the bill was not talking to the needs and the dependence of coastal communities. So
right, Mr. Zukulu, it seems we've had an interruption there, but we'll just give you a moment to just recover the connection there. But what you are saying is of greatest concern is government investing powers in traditional councils. So you can continue.
Yes, yeah. So yeah, I'm sorry, somebody, I'm using my mobile phone here. So the other concern is that increasingly government, politicians who are supposed to serve the interests of the people who voted them, but you see them protecting the rights of the so-called investors at the expense of the concerns and the needs of the local communities. Local communities have a right to be listened to be consulted by public servants like the politicians. So when you see a government that goes out without talking to its people, but goes ahead and do anything, you look at what has been happening now, and repeatedly the voices of the rural people being undermined by Minister Mandashe, where he has used all sorts of words to say the new colonialism, the apartheid, but not speaking to what the coastal communities they are raising, and deciding to ignore those voices of these coastal communities who are raising concern. Even when he started to do the so-called consultation recently, because of the very clear, overwhelming opposition, he goes and he talks to traditional leaders instead of going to the people who are directly affected. In terms of customary law, traditional leaders do not have an authority and right to speak on behalf of communities unless they have been given a mandate or a message to convey on behalf of those communities.
I want to get into that, Mr. Zukulu. Is this vested interest in these traditional councils, has government done it formally, or has it been rather ceremonial with the assumption that the traditional leaders assume this authority on behalf of communities? But as you say, that requires a mandate. And can we just blame the minister? Because the Eastern Cape Premier, Oscar Mabuyane, through his spokesperson, defended this as well, saying that the Eastern Cape Cabinet affirmed that exploring sustainable developments is critical if the province is to shift from being one that sends labor to other provinces. So there's an endorsement from the Eastern Cape Premier's office as well. So are you saying government as a whole is colluding against the people?
We are saying, they are saying all of those things, but then if they have all those good intentions, why are they not consulting with the people who would be directly affected?
All right. Tell us, what have communities said to government officials? Because I don't want us to spend too much time on what has failed. What have you said to these government officials? Have you proffered suggestions on how you can use these intentions, as you say, of creating jobs, of finding sustainable ways of energy without harming the environment, without harming the communities themselves, including their livelihoods?
All right. The general principle of the law in this country is that the affected and interested parties must be consulted, and the coastal communities are directly affected if an oil or gas exploration is to happen in the very ocean that they are using as a source of livelihood. So, and that consultation and the engagement with them has not happened. And if they have got all the good intentions, but what is stopping them from discussing those good intentions with the coastal communities? But also, we are also talking about the livelihood here. We're saying it's critical that the livelihood, in whatever we are doing, look at the livelihood of the people. Look at the masses of people. We know in this country that the challenge we have is the unemployment. And if the exploration goes ahead, it's not going to create jobs for all of those people who are reliant on the ocean. Government in this country, the Department of Environmental Affairs, which is responsible for the fisheries management, has established cooperatives in all the coastal villages where the people have been given permits to go out, where they've been promised boats so that they are able to get into the mainstream economy by through fishing. And before that plan has been fully implemented, here now the Department of Mineral Resources comes up with the oil and gas exploration, which is in direct conflict with what the Environmental Affairs has been planned.
And you're absolutely right. Fishing rights for minority groups or disadvantaged groups has been very central to reform that the Environmental Affairs Department has been looking at. So I want to talk about the international local scientists who are giving you support. I mean, for us who are not familiar, it's all at a very high level discussion what a seismic survey is. I've heard of things like 2D, 3D seismic. What do you understand in the oil and gas exploration? What will they do? And will this come out of the hearings on the 30th of May that are set to challenge Shell's environmental authorization?
Yeah. All right. I'm not a marine biologist, but I'm able to read what is being said by scientists. And these scientists have signed affidavit, which therefore tells us as coastal communities that there is, and there is a research that has been done, there are papers published that talk to the impact of seismic exploration. But also, we also know that globally, places that have allowed the exploration and the drilling for oil are sitting with huge challenges of oil spills. We know, for instance, the question of Niger Delta in Nigeria, where people today are not able to fish anymore, where people cannot even grow crops. We have seen some articles published by the Nigerian people from the Ogoniland, who are talking about that it's not only about being unable to fish anymore due to the oil spills, which have been caused by Shell, by the way. Also, they can no longer produce crops on the land due to the impact of oil. But it's not only that. When we're looking again locally, nationally, and internationally, we are living through the climate change era, where the impact of climate change, we are already in rural areas as indigenous people who are dependent on the land, on natural resources. We are already feeling the impact with the rainfall patterns that are changing, rains that are coming at the wrong time when we are harvesting, destroying our crops, rains that come in the middle of winter, and then we end up losing all our rooty crops, which are winter supplementary crops. So where we have got livestock and our poultry that is getting sick all year round due to the increased temperatures. So if therefore South Africa, which is signatory to UNFCCC, the United Nations Framework for Climate Change, is now, which has promised that they will cut down on fossil fuel and carbon emission, but now goes against that and is exploring for more fossil fuels. And we know that we are, again, in terms of the international law, we know that what is coming up for countries that are not reducing their carbon footprint, there are climate sanctions which are due to start very soon. And when those climate sanctions begin, we are going to be, again, the poor people who are going to suffer the most in this country. So we are concerned as well from that particular, in terms of the international principles and international law, that as a country, we are supposed to be cutting down as we move towards 2030. We have signed those UN contracts to reduce the carbon emission. So therefore, we should be committed, and we know it is already affecting us.
All right.
Already, when they went to Glasgow, yeah.
All right, Mr. Zukulu, hopefully we'll catch up with you. As you say, it's a conversation that is taking place all around the world. Namibia having had the same challenges as you mentioned, Uganda also having that conversation. Pressure groups, in fact, saying that people are being chased away from their land in order for multinationals to be able to pursue some of these projects.